Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
I stood at the living room window one chilly autumn morning, gazing at the tree-lined street that had been my home for decades. The view looked much as it always had: wide sidewalks, neat lawns, stately oaks turning bronze and crimson. Yet the world seemed different, as if the colors had been muted by the pain and confusion of the past year. I felt the weight of the house around me, silent and still. When Patricia, my wife, my partner of 45 years, passed away, it was as though the rhythm of my life slowed to a disjointed crawl. Every piece of furniture, every photograph, every corner of the home reminded me of her. I found comfort only in small daily rituals, making coffee exactly the way she had taught me, flipping the channels in the mid-afternoon, or taking a slow walk around the block at dusk. My name is Daniel Peterson. Most folks call me Dan, though my wife liked to call me Dee. Patricia was known to most people as Pat, though I called her P. We were a strong pair. In our quiet Midwestern city, we had raised our children, worked steady jobs, and eventually settled into retirement. Our kids all lived in different states. They had their own families, their own challenges, so it was typically just Pat and me in our home. And for years, it was perfect, peaceful, predictable. We lived on a street where everybody once had kids who grew up, moved out, and started their own lives. The neighborhood population had changed. Most of the families we had known transformed into single-person households, especially single women widowed earlier than they ever expected. They banded together in a church group that not only organized social events for the parish, bingo nights, fundraising dinners, rummage sales, and funeral luncheons, but also offered companionship in an otherwise quiet row of houses. Among these women were Mary Jo, Wanda, Melissa, Betsy, and Missy. A few others, Kathy, Wilma, and Martha, were older and not always able to attend gatherings, but they remained part of this close-knit circle. Pat and I were the minority on the block, a long-married couple whose household was still led by a man and a woman. Our day-to-day life was simple. I had been in the IT field, so I spent many hours tinkering with a computer or my tablet. Pat had worked as a cosmetologist, and even in retirement, she would sometimes do small touch-ups on the neighbors' hair, give them manicures, or show them how to style something differently. She and I called each other D and P, short for Dan and Pat, but also for countless other silly nicknames that had sprouted through the decades. She loved clothes, always rummaging for bargains on dresses, skirts, or shoes, while I stuck to a small, unchanging wardrobe of sensible trousers, polo shirts, and socks. That was enough for me. Our golden years felt truly golden until the first wave of COVID came crashing into everyone's life. The pandemic halted church gatherings for a while, but the close group of neighbors still kept tabs on each other. We tried to be safe, limiting how many people we saw at once, spacing ourselves on porches or in living rooms. Then it happened. Pat tested positive, and while I caught a mild version of the virus, hers worsened alarmingly. She ended up on a ventilator in the ICU, isolated from me and everyone else, and then she was gone. It's a haze when I think back on it now. Sharp memories of phone calls with nurses, abiding fear, moments of weeping in hallways. A modest funeral was held, restricted by social distancing rules. It felt barren. My kids were only able to attend by video calls. It was heartbreaking in ways I can't fully put into words. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, I slipped into quiet mourning. My heartbreak never entirely left me, but the church ladies became my lifeline. Betsy, in particular, started bringing me warm meals nearly every day. Mary Jo helped with laundry, Wanda with cleaning, and Missy and Melissa organized visits, so I wasn't left alone with my thoughts. Betsy, though, was there more often than anyone else. I remember one afternoon, as she wiped down my kitchen counters, I asked, "Betsy, are you sure you want to do this? I can handle some chores myself." She looked over her shoulder and gave me a kind smile. "Oh, hush, Dee. Your wife was my friend for so many years. This is the least I can do. Besides, I've got a fair amount of free time these days." I didn't argue, mostly because I had no energy to do so. I was just grateful for her presence and steady conversation. As that first year without Pat began to unfold, Betsy's involvement in my life increased. She did my grocery shopping, organized my receipts, and even made sure I had fresh produce for the healthy soups she insisted I eat. The other church ladies would drop in with a lasagna or a cake and stop by for a short chat. But Betsy stayed. Sometimes we watched old sitcoms in the evenings. Other times, she simply sat at my dining table, sipped tea, and showed me photographs from her past. Over time, I learned that she had never married. She had a daughter, grown and gone now, and had lived alone for years. Something about her calm acceptance of things helped me. I felt less like an island. One of the unexpected changes in my life stemmed from the fact that Pat had always been the keeper of the household in terms of cooking and laundry. I was helpless in those areas. More than once, Betsy teased me about how poorly I washed dishes or how I'd mess up the washing machine. She quickly took over. Also, since I was turning 65 that year, a lot of my clothes were worn out. I told Betsy I'd probably go buy new trousers and shirts, but she peered into my late wife's closet and said gently, "Dee, your wife has so many clothes. Some of her casual pants might fit you. You could probably find some tops that work for everyday wear too." At first, the idea struck me as odd. I blinked and said, "What? You mean rummage through Pat's things? Use them myself?" "Why not?" Betsy replied. "You're mostly at home. Nobody's going to judge. And the church ladies won't mind. In fact, they've said they like the idea of you keeping Pat's spirit around the house." I swallowed, unsure. But the logic made sense. I began to try on a few of Pat's less feminine pieces, plain tees, pull-on pants with elastic waistbands, even some sleepwear that was basically unisex. That was the beginning. And indeed, the ladies showed no surprise when they saw me, perhaps wearing a pair of Pat's pastel pajama bottoms instead of my usual drab set. Mary Jo once commented kindly, "How nice to see you still making good use of her wardrobe. She'd be pleased." I nodded, choosing to believe she was right. After all, Pat had known these women for years, and she probably shared more with them than I ever realized. A few months passed. Late winter gave way to a hesitant spring. The pandemic restrictions eased somewhat, and more frequent visits were allowed. The group decided to start using Pat's old cosmetology room again, an extra bedroom she had converted. It was filled with hair rollers, nail tools, hair dyes, and all manner of makeup. Missy had salon experience, so she took the lead, offering small trims or styling sessions to the rest of the ladies. I found myself getting touch-ups too. My hair had grown out over months of not bothering with a barber, so Missy offered to shape it neatly. Then, as time went on, she gave me a subtle wave. I would never have imagined it, but I found the fuss and friendly chattering rather soothing. During this period, Betsy began sleeping over once in a while, claiming it was just more practical than leaving at night. We had a spare bedroom, but slowly, our casual closeness blossomed into something deeper. I realized how comforting it was to wake up knowing someone else was in the house. One afternoon, as Betsy folded laundry in the living room, I murmured, "I appreciate everything you do, Betsy. I hope you realize that." She looked up, smoothed a towel, and said, "I know, Dee." She paused, eyes resting on me fondly. "I've come to care about you a lot." I felt my throat tighten. My wife had only been gone just over a year, but the yearning for companionship, beyond just friendship, had quietly grown. As if reading my mind, Betsy reached over and placed her warm hand on mine. We left unspoken the complexities of the situation. We simply recognized that we had each found comfort in the other. The day of my 66th birthday arrived. The church ladies threw me a little party with cake, tea, and a few small gifts. There was laughter in my living room for the first time in ages. The main present they offered me was a leather shoulder bag to replace my old, beat-up computer briefcase. It was nice, but definitely had a more feminine design, complete with a small zippered pocket inside. Missy grinned as she helped me transfer my wallet and other items into it. "Look, you'll still carry it over your shoulder like a typical bag, but this one's much nicer than your ragged old one." Mary Jo let out a soft laugh. "Don't worry, Dee. We've seen you carrying a shoulder strap for ages. This is just an upgrade." She tapped the side of the new purse. "Plenty of room for your keys, phone, tissues, anything you need." I stood there, uncertain, but I appreciated their effort. After all, these women had become my makeshift family. They seemed genuinely happy that I was stepping into more integrated routines with them. Hair done, nails done, wearing comfortable clothes that had belonged to Pat, and now using a bag that resembled a purse. It felt odd, but not entirely wrong. I could see how seamlessly I blended in with them in these small gestures. Toward the end of that birthday celebration, most of the ladies went home except for Betsy, who lingered behind. She came to my side in the kitchen and said softly, "I have a special gift for you later, if you like." I felt my cheeks flush. "I think I'd like that," I replied, not entirely sure what she meant, but I suspected. And that evening, after we cleaned up the wrapping paper and leftover cake, Betsy and I sat together on the couch. She brushed my hair back and asked, "Dee, how do you feel about me staying here more consistently, maybe even in the same bed?" My heart pounded, an emotion both joyful and nervous. Well, I'd like that," I managed. "Me too," she whispered, resting her head on my shoulder. "But there's something I need to tell you, and it might sound surprising." Her tone was serious enough that I turned to face her. "All right, go on." She swallowed, folded her hands in her lap, then spoke. "Before Pat passed, she told me things about your intimate life, and I think you know I've never really been interested in men. My past relationships were always with women, but with you, there's something that draws me in. The truth is, if we're going to share a bed, I need you to embrace the side of you that isn't strictly male. That's who I connect with." I blinked, nerves surfacing. I'm not entirely sure I follow." She offered a gentle smile. "Look at how your life has shifted this past year. You've found comfort wearing Pat's clothes, letting the ladies style your hair, carrying a purse, sitting down when you use the bathroom, even wearing some of those supportive undergarments for your own health. You've been part of our group in ways that go well beyond how men usually behave in this neighborhood. I believe it's natural for you, maybe more natural than you realize." My thoughts swarmed, but the kernel of truth in her words was undeniable. "So, you'd like me to keep going? Expand on that?" "Yes," she said simply, "because I care about you, and I need a companion who feels comfortable with me and with the life I lead." A mix of relief and confusion washed over me, but all I said was, "I trust you, Betsy." She leaned in, kissed me softly. "Then let's see where this takes us." In the following months, the world kept changing. The city lifted more restrictions, and the church ladies resumed many of their regular activities. Betsy sold her small home and moved into mine, bringing her clothes and favorite furniture. The ladies still came over, often for salon day in the spare room or just to chat. Through it all, Betsy encouraged me toward more overtly feminine habits. She showed me how to shape my eyebrows subtly, how to style my hair in ways that flattered my face. The ladies taught me about stockings rather than socks, about wearing supportive bras, and how to coordinate colors in outfits. One memorable morning, Missy handed me a bra, softly padded, and said, "Go on, try this on. Bet it fits perfectly." She even slipped in small removable forms. Pat had bigger ones, but these are from a friend who had extras. Let's see. I felt so awkward, but Missy helped me hook the bra, and I was startled at how naturally it fit my frame. Betsy watched from the doorway, offering a supportive nod. Our gazes met in the mirror, and a rush of warmth spread through me. Some hidden weight in my chest lifted. I felt more connected to my late wife, to Betsy, and to the group. It was as though I found a daily routine that gave me peace. Get up, wash and moisturize my face, slip into underwear that was now typically from Pat's drawer, fasten a bra, put on a blouse, and step into a pair of comfortable pull-on slacks or sometimes a skirt. Meanwhile, Betsy and I found closeness each evening. We shared dinners, often made together or brought by the other ladies, and she taught me what her affections entailed, though we kept all details as private as possible. We rarely spoke about it in front of the others, but everyone in the group seemed to sense how happy we were. I learned how to respond to Betsy's affectionate gestures. Kisses on the neck, soft touches on the arm. These were new forms of warmth in my life. The bond that formed between us felt strong and deeply meaningful. Even though I was still mourning Pat, it felt almost like life had given me a second chance at companionship. The group started calling me Dee, formerly Dee, so whenever we were out in public, it didn't feel so out of place. I trimmed my beard close enough that it was nearly gone. My voice, if I softened it, could pass for a gentle older woman's tone. By the second year of this slow transformation, I had begun attending certain church events alongside the other ladies. Bingo nights, rummage sales, even funeral luncheons for other parishioners. Most folks just knew me as one of the neighborhood women who assisted in the parish. Few people asked questions. Those who did were content with the explanation that my name was Dee Peterson, a quiet retiree who lived on the corner. One day, Betsy and I sat in the living room watching a gardening show. She picked up the remote, turned the volume low, and rested her head on my shoulder. "Have you thought about our future officially?" she asked. "You mean like a wedding?" I turned my head, meeting her gaze. She nodded. "Yes, I'm interested in something more permanent." I took a shaky breath. I honestly never thought I'd get married again, not after losing Pat. Betsy placed a hand lightly on my knee. "I know, but what if we do? It wouldn't have to be fancy or huge, just a small ceremony with the church ladies and a handful of friends." My emotions swirled. I was grateful, touched, and a bit nervous. "You really think the church would allow that?" I asked, haltingly. Her lips curved into a gentle smile. "They've already had a few ceremonies for couples who don't follow the traditional husband-wife model. The pastor is open-minded. He's known me for years, and he knows you through the volunteer work you do now." "Yes, I've introduced myself to him as Dee, though I still feel a bit shy around him." "It'll be all right," Betsy assured me. We decided on a date in early fall. The church ladies lit up with excitement when we told them. Melissa declared, "We need to do a proper dress shopping trip for Dee." The others clapped and cheered. For a moment, I felt a mix of bashfulness and pride. They were treating me like one of their own. I found my new sense of style had grown. It was no longer just wearing my late wife's slacks. Now I had skirts, blouses, shoes with small heels, handbags, even a few dresses that I had grown comfortable wearing. My hair, well past my collar, was styled into a gentle wave that framed my cheeks. I had also, at Betsy's quiet encouragement, begun a hormone regimen that helped soften my features over time. I tried not to overthink it. It was just a step that felt right in our household dynamic. A few months before the wedding, we attended Easter service as a group. It was the first time I truly dressed up in a flouncy spring dress, complete with a modest matching hat, lace gloves, and heels. I rose early that Sunday, curled my hair, put on light makeup with pastel eyeshadow, and slipped into my outfit. I felt an enormous wave of butterflies in my stomach when I looked in the mirror. Would people stare? Could anyone see I wasn't born to this? When I emerged into the living room, Betsy stood near the sofa in her own pink dress and wide-brimmed hat. She saw me, gave a fond smile, and whispered, "You look lovely." We walked to the car with Wanda and Melissa, who offered even more compliments. At church, folks only gave friendly nods. The pastor greeted me as Dee, wearing a gentle smile. After the service, we went to a family restaurant for a holiday meal. I ended up sharing a booth with Betsy, sipping iced tea and feeling a sense of belonging I hadn't known before. Later that evening, as Betsy and I unwound at home, she took my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I know it's not easy to show yourself in a new light, but you handled it with grace." I felt a surge of gratitude. I was nervous, I confessed, but it also felt good, like I was part of the group. She leaned forward and kissed my cheek. "You're more than part of it. You're family." The summer leading up to our wedding day came and went in a flurry of plans. We had chosen a small local banquet room for a brief reception after the ceremony. We anticipated no more than about 20 guests in total, mostly the church ladies and a few others from the parish. The date was set for late September. I went with Missy, Wanda, and Betsy to find the perfect dress in a small boutique downtown. The experience was surreal. Standing in a dressing room, trying on white lace and satin, I thought of how Pat had worn a wedding gown all those decades ago, and how back then I was in a black tuxedo. Life had pivoted in a direction I never saw coming. One of the sales attendants was an older woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. She was entirely unfazed by my presence in the bridal section. She showed me a selection of gowns that were forgiving in the waist and offered a flattering line. I ended up falling in love with a simple A-line dress, lightly embroidered around the bodice, a soft skirt that brushed my ankles. When I stepped out of the dressing room, Betsy's mouth parted in a smile. The ladies clapped quietly. "Perfect," Betsy said, voice thick with emotion. "Is it?" I asked, looking at myself in the mirror. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. Wanda nodded vigorously. "Yes, it's exactly right." So we purchased it. I picked out a pair of modest white pumps, a short veil, and some pearl earrings. The sales attendant gave me a warm smile as she rang up our items. "Congratulations, dear," she said. "I hope your day is lovely." The final weeks moved quickly. Each day felt increasingly dreamlike. I sometimes woke with a jolt, thinking I'd hear Pat in the kitchen, only to realize I was the one with chores now. I'd slip on a robe, a feminine robe, and shuffle to make coffee. Betsy would come in, offer me a small peck on the cheek, and we'd talk about wedding details. She kept her outfit more casual, a white pantsuit with subtle embellishments, adding a bright purple corsage. Mary Jo and Missy would be our official witnesses and sign the documents. Finally, the big day arrived. Early that morning, Missy did my hair in a vintage style, framing the soft features that had developed in the last year. The house felt alive with chatter, with Mary Jo bustling around making sure no detail was missed. At one point, she turned to me in the spare room where my dress hung on a padded hanger and asked, "Nervous?" I let out a shaky laugh. More than I expected. I never imagined standing on the bride's side. She patted my shoulder. You'll do just fine, and Betsy truly loves you. Anyone can see it." Betsy had gone to the church ahead of us to finalize a few details and greet early arriving guests. After a couple of hours of careful preparation, hair pinned, light makeup blended, the dress zipped in the back with Wanda's assistance, shoes buckled, I looked in the mirror. My reflection was that of a woman with gentle lines, a lightly powdered face, and a quiver in her expression that spoke of equal parts nervousness and joy. Wanda placed a small white veil on my head. "Beautiful," she whispered, stepping back. The church ladies beamed. I realized it was nearly time. My stomach fluttered, but I felt their support behind me and took courage in that. We arrived at the church in an unassuming sedan. The building was simple, the same place Pat and I had attended for years, the same hall where rummage sales were held. Standing at the entrance in my flowing white dress, I had a flash of memory. Pat by my side, arm in arm, walking into Sunday morning service. I allowed myself a moment to honor that memory, then let it fade into the sense of the present. Betsy was here, forging a new moment with me. The music was a recording of soft piano. Wanda led me down the aisle, though it was just a short walk to the front. Betsy stood there, wearing her crisp pantsuit and a white blouse. She gave me a tender smile. Mary Jo and Missy looked on with quiet admiration. The pastor glanced at me with warmth in his eyes before speaking. "Friends, we are gathered here to witness a union between two people who have found each other through life's circumstances. Let us honor the bond they share." I took a steadying breath. Betsy reached for my hands, clasping them gently. We recited brief vows, customized so that the language was universal, partner to partner. My heart pounded in my chest, and I glanced at Betsy's face as she slipped a ring on my finger. In that moment, I felt a swirl of gratitude for having found solace after so much loss. When the pastor pronounced us officially joined, Betsy lifted my short veil, leaned in, and gave me a soft kiss that tasted like hope. A handful of onlookers clapped. I turned, saw Wanda dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and realized my own cheeks were damp. We moved to the small reception area in the church's basement. Just a handful of round tables and some simple streamers. Mary Jo and Missy had arranged fresh flowers on each table. Everyone enjoyed coffee, tea, fruit punch, and an assortment of baked goods. People came by, offered hugs, and complimented my dress or Betsy's outfit. We received a few gifts, mostly items for our shared kitchen. The entire affair was peaceful, understated, and unexpectedly perfect. Once the gathering wound down, Betsy and I thanked everyone and prepared to head home. The ladies teased that they would give us privacy. I recall Kathy giving me a gentle hug. "You look so happy," she said. I couldn't help the faint laugh that escaped me as I nodded. Betsy insisted on driving us back. Stepping into our home, we found it decorated with a few leftover ribbons from the ladies who had snuck over earlier. A note sat on the kitchen counter reading, "Congratulations from all of us. Enjoy your evening." Betsy turned to me. "Let's open a bottle of the wine we've been saving," she suggested. "That sounds wonderful." I pulled a pair of glasses from the cabinet. We kicked off our shoes and retired to the living room, sipping a little wine, letting the quiet settle. It felt surreal to be married again. I changed out of my dress into a soft, lace-trimmed nightgown, while Betsy wore a simple satin robe. We moved to the couch and gazed out the picture window, streetlights glowing softly. Betsy laced her fingers through mine. "How are you doing?" she asked quietly. I turned to face her, feeling waves of contentment. "I'm good," I managed, stumbling over my own emotions. "It's a lot to take in, but it feels right." She smiled, leaning in to rest her forehead against mine. "I want us to have the kind of closeness you've always wanted in a partner." My voice went unsteady. We already do, in many ways. A gentle hush fell over the room as we let that truth settle. I thought about Pat, and I silently hoped she would be pleased for me. Maybe she was, in her own way, watching over the woman I had become. Life had twisted my journey into something unexpected, but there was real comfort in it. I had a partner, a new presence at my side. Betsy had become my comfort and my confidant. And for the first time since losing Pat, I felt a deep sense of warmth at the thought of tomorrow. Eventually, we stood and made our way to the bedroom we now shared. We turned off the lights, but left the curtains slightly open so the faint glow of the moon cast delicate shadows on the walls. I crawled under the covers with Betsy. She wrapped an arm around me, pressing her cheek to my shoulder. We lay there in silence for a while, simply appreciating that we had chosen each other. In the days and weeks that followed our wedding, not much changed in a public sense, but privately, my life felt entirely new. The ring on my finger kept reminding me that I belonged to this connection with Betsy. The church ladies accepted me as one of their own. If we visited them, it was no longer a group of women plus Daniel. It was Betsy and Dee, together. One bright morning, we all gathered at Mary Jo's backyard for a potluck brunch. The gentle breeze carried the scent of flowers. I wore a casual summer dress and wedge sandals. Mary Jo had set up chairs on the patio. Wanda poured iced tea, while Missy passed around fruit salad. Betsy and I found a spot in the shade. The conversation meandered from the weather to church events to a rummage sale they were planning. "You should help us in the clothing section this time, Dee," said Melissa, adjusting the collar of her blouse. "You've got a good eye for sorting which items will sell." I dipped my head in acknowledgement, still not entirely used to giving style advice. "Sure, I can do that," Betsy chimed in. "Dee's become quite the resource in selecting clothing that's comfortable yet stylish. She's been reorganizing our closet at home, too." Wanda grinned. "Next, we'll have you doing everyone's hair." We all laughed, but there was genuine affection under the teasing. After brunch, Betsy and I lingered. Mary Jo, who had known Pat for so long, pulled me aside gently. "You're looking happier these days," she said, her voice kind. "It warms my heart to see you settled again. This group cherishes you, and I believe Pat would be proud." A pang of emotion formed in my chest. "Thank you, Mary Jo," I replied, my voice tight. "I like to think she would be." Mary Jo's eyes misted. "I know she is." She gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze, then bustled off to help in the kitchen. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, writing a short note to each of my children, updating them on life. I hadn't told them everything in detail. It was difficult to know how best to explain what had changed since their mother's passing. They were supportive, but they lived far away and had never witnessed firsthand the shifts in how I dressed or how I introduced myself. Still, I hinted that I had found someone special, a companion with whom I felt very close and had chosen to marry. Maybe one day they would visit and see for themselves. Life found its routines again. The days continued, each one filled with small tasks. Betsy and I found ourselves falling into a pattern reminiscent of a quiet married couple, sharing meals, going to church gatherings, watching old films in the evening. Every now and then, we'd stand side by side at the bathroom mirror, brushing our teeth. She'd glance at me, a playful glint in her eye. "We make a pretty decent pair, you know," she'd muse, and I'd agree. We do. The transformations in my clothing style, my grooming, even my figure from the mild hormone supplements, those continued in slow increments. My chest developed a softer contour that made wearing a bra more natural, and I found that it felt almost comforting. A few times, I caught sight of myself in a department store mirror or in a reflective window and had to pause, startled that I recognized something so different from my younger years. But I felt content, not uneasy. Betsy would occasionally brush her palm across my back or place a hand gently where a bra strap rested, a gesture that seemed to assure me that everything was fine, that I was where I belonged. By the time the holidays rolled around, Betsy and I were well established as a couple. We hosted a small Thanksgiving get-together for the church ladies, who brought pies, stuffing, and sweet potato casserole. My grown children sent text messages from afar. The table was decorated with autumn leaves. I wore a burnt orange sweater dress with black tights, my hair pinned back with a bronze clip. Betsy wore a matching sweater set. The conversation was lively, with Wanda retelling a humorous story about a rummage sale fiasco and Mary Jo raving about a new bakery in town. I found myself laughing easily. It was the most content I'd been for quite some time. One quiet afternoon in December, I sat alone in the living room, wrapping a scarf around my shoulders. The house was silent. Betsy had gone to visit her daughter for the weekend. I wasn't needed for that visit, so I stayed behind to catch up on chores. It was rare that I found myself entirely alone. My mind drifted back to the earliest moments of my transformation, sorting through Pat's clothes, wearing them tentatively, the dull ache of grief in every step. Now, a year or two after that first uncertain step, I was no longer the same Daniel. I was Dee. And though I never would have predicted this life, I found a calm contentment in it that I treasured. I stood, tidied up the coffee table, then walked to the hallway where we had hung a collage of photos. One photo was of Pat and me, smiling on a beach vacation decades ago. Next to it was a more recent snapshot of Betsy and me, taken by Missy at a potluck. In the second photo, I wore a light sundress and sandals, my arm looped around Betsy's shoulders. Both pictures showed me with a loving partner, though the person in each photograph was subtly but unmistakably different. I placed my hand gently on the frame containing Pat's picture. "Thank you for everything," I whispered, a wave of emotion fluttering through me. Then my gaze shifted to the photo of Betsy and me. "And thank you," I murmured in the quiet, to whatever forces had guided me to this new bond. A few weeks later, Christmas approached. The church ladies planned a small caroling event for a local nursing home, and they asked me to participate. We gathered in a circle outside the facility, singing soft carols. Betsy, standing by my side, wore a bright red coat. I was in a similar coat, though a deeper burgundy. The residents, seated by the windows, beamed at us. I felt shy about my singing voice, but among these women, it didn't matter if I was off key. The unity of the moment mattered more. New Year's Eve was spent quietly at our house. Betsy prepared a simple dinner of roast chicken and vegetables. We sipped sparkling grape juice at midnight and listened to distant fireworks. She stood next to me at the large window, gazing at the dark sky lit with momentary flashes of color. "Another year, Dee," she said softly. I nodded, leaning my head on her shoulder. "Yes, and we're together for it." In that moment, any remnants of lingering doubts seemed to settle. I was no longer that grieving husband who didn't know how to operate the laundry machines. I was someone who shared chores, clothes, and a life with Betsy. The transformation had been slow and steady, guided by the church lady's acceptance and the warmth Betsy offered me every single day. As time marched onward, I became more involved in the church volunteer work. Betsy and I took on the distribution of weekly bulletins, helped with rummage sales, and occasionally set up for funeral luncheons. People in the parish recognized me as Dee, one of the ladies from the block. My awkwardness speaking with the pastor diminished. He would frequently say, "Thank you for your dedication," after we finished a shift of sorting donated clothes or scrubbing down tables in the communal hall. Even he, who had once known me as Daniel, seemed to treat me as though I had always been part of this circle. Whenever my children phoned, I kept the conversation general. They knew I had remarried, that Betsy was a kind soul, that we shared a pleasant routine. I tried to explain I was living a bit differently now, but they never asked too many questions. Perhaps they sensed I was content. One day, I hoped they would visit so I could reintroduce myself as Dee in person. For now, though, it seemed enough that we still connected through phone calls and shared updates on grandchildren. Spring rolled around once more. The sun grew stronger, the flowers began to bloom in front yards, and a sense of renewal spread across the neighborhood. Betsy and I continued in our quiet marital life. We'd have simple disagreements about groceries or how to organize the hall closet, but the closeness never wavered. Our usual routine included a morning walk, me in a comfortable outfit, loose blouse, casual slacks, or a midi skirt and walking shoes. Sometimes Wanda or Melissa joined us, turning the walk into a friendly morning chat. On one such morning, Wanda brought up an upcoming charity dinner. We need a few volunteers to help serve. Pass out bread baskets, fill water glasses. Are you and Betsy in? I glanced at Betsy, who nodded. Sure, I answered. We're happy to help. Wanda smiled. Great. It'll be good to have you both there, and the rest of the church ladies, of course. That evening, as Betsy and I relaxed on the porch, I thanked her again for encouraging me to step out of my comfort zone. Without you, I'd never have ended up here, I said, gesturing to my outfit and the general sense of belonging I felt. She rested a hand gently over mine. I might say the same to you. Without your willingness, my life would still feel lonely. Her eyes took on a soft shine. We made space for each other. I thought of that old saying, how life can change in an instant. When Pat and I said our vows so many decades ago, we never anticipated we'd be parted by a pandemic. Now I was married again, but in a completely different way. And though I still carried memories of Pat every day, there was room in my heart for Betsy. Time continued flowing, bringing with it small daily joys. We hosted more potlucks. We greeted new neighbors who moved onto the street, explaining that the rest of us had been there for ages. The church events multiplied as the world settled into a new normal. I maintained my gentle routines with the ladies, helping set up crafts, tidying the parish hall, collecting donations at rummage sales, bagging items with a delicate flourish that matched the style of a cheerful, older volunteer. In all these tasks, Betsy was at my side or close by. Even if she stepped away to direct a project, she'd give me a small wave, and I'd respond with a nod. We'd meet at the end of the day, drive home together, share dinner. Everything about our life felt quietly intertwined, and at times, that closeness was all I needed to feel safe. Now and then, a wave of nostalgia for Pat overcame me, particularly when rummaging in the closet or stumbling upon an old card from her. But that no longer caused me the same heartbreak it once did. Instead, I felt a gentle kind of gratitude. Pat had, in a way, helped bring Betsy and me together by introducing me to the church ladies. She had laid the foundation for this new chapter of my life. One Sunday morning, near the 2-year mark of my marriage to Betsy, I found myself dressing in front of the mirror in a purple blouse and black knee-length skirt. I'd chosen a necklace with small pearls. My hair, which now barely brushed my shoulders, took only a few minutes to style. Betsy stepped into the bedroom and took a quick look. "You're looking elegant this morning," she commented. "Going for a special look?" I shrugged, a small smile playing on my lips. Just felt like wearing something nice. We do have that coffee hour at church afterward. She approached, brushing an imaginary piece of lint off my shoulder. "Good choice. I'll wear my lilac blazer and we'll match in spirit." I turned to face her. "I like that idea," I said, slipping an arm around her waist. We exchanged a small laugh and a soft embrace. Then we headed out the door, side by side. When we arrived at the church, Melissa and Missy were there, ready with a tray of muffins. They waved us inside. We spent the morning greeting parishioners, serving coffee, and smiling at the folks who passed by. The pastor made an announcement about an upcoming fish fry fundraiser, and I mentally noted that Betsy and I had already signed up to help. Mary Jo walked over with a playful grin, reminding me to check the sign-up sheet for side dishes. In those simple interactions, I realized how deeply I'd become part of the church ladies group. They never questioned my presence. Instead, they relied on me as an integral piece of the volunteer puzzle. Eventually, the last of the coffee hour dishes was cleaned and the group trickled out. Betsy and I lingered, turning off lights in the parish kitchen. Once done, we linked arms and stepped into the crisp afternoon air. As we walked to the car, I felt a wave of calm. My life had indeed changed drastically, but it had stabilized into something I cherished. Betsy turned to me with a quiet smile. "Ready to head home?" I nodded. "Yes," I said, feeling the sense of the word sink deep. Home. She squeezed my hand, and together we drove back to our street, lined with those stately oaks, the leaves shining green in the midday sun. Our neighborhood once felt too large and empty after Pat's passing, yet it had somehow come alive again with new meaning. Stepping into our house, I could still sense Pat's presence in an echo, a faint but comforting memory that no longer pained me. Because now the rooms were also filled with the gentle hum of life shared with Betsy. That evening, I settled onto the sofa with a cup of tea. Betsy joined me, flipping through a catalog of dresses. She showed me one with floral embroidery, a style that reminded me of the old outfits Pat used to love. I smiled, resting my head on Betsy's shoulder, and we talked about everyday matters. Next week's errands, who would be attending the upcoming rummage sale, and whether we needed to buy more dish soap. It was so ordinary, yet it felt perfect. My mind drifted to how far I'd come, from grieving widow to a new role among the church ladies, from Daniel to Dee, from a lonely house to a house shared with Betsy. There was still the memory of Pat, tucked gently in my heart, guiding me in small ways. And there was Betsy's enduring support, an anchor in the present. I realized I had found a sense of wholeness in this unexpected path. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and life marched on as it always does. But each season, from the pastel buds of spring to the harvest gold of autumn, felt sweeter now. In the quiet moments, sipping tea at the kitchen table, laughing with the ladies over bingo cards, or strolling through the grocery store with Betsy, I found a kind of raw truth and realism to my existence that I never anticipated. A man who lost his wife, discovered companionship in his late 60s, and found himself wearing dresses and volunteering beside a circle of neighborhood women who embraced him, or perhaps embraced her, wholeheartedly. Late one summer afternoon, I walked out to the porch where Betsy was trimming a potted plant. I joined her, kneeling down to help clear the dried leaves. She lifted her gaze. "Think these buds will bloom again next season?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, I think so. They just need care." She extended a hand, and I grasped it. We rose together, setting aside the trimmings. Then we stood quietly, looking out at our peaceful street. She leaned in and whispered, "Shall we go inside?" I smiled. "Yes, let's." And as we stepped back into our home, I felt the warmth of belonging surround me like a gentle embrace. We might be older, but the comfort we found in one another and in the life we built with our friends was steady. It was real. We both understood that every sunset marked one more day we got to share as a family. We had chosen each other. We lived in a state of domestic rhythm, a unity forged by unexpected circumstances. And I, D. Peterson, had discovered that I could still find a new kind of joy after profound grief. It was here, in a comfortable neighborhood, in the company of the warmest circle of women with Betsy at my side.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.